Hey, everybody, I'm Andy Weinberg, and welcome to episode 86 of the David Osikinen In the Pocket podcast, coming to you, as always, from the Wildfire Radio studios in beautiful Woodbury, New Jersey, on this warm, very warm, muggy Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
And I guess it's good that it's warm and muggy because tomorrow's the start of baseball, Dave. Baseball season.
Play ball.
Play ball.
Yeah, man, that's exciting.
Although it's probably going to rain and be cold and miserable this weekend. But
most of my opening days, baseball, as you know, being a Phillies fan, it's always been kind of crappy weather, right, opening day. But I think the last opening day that they had, it was a beautiful day, right?
Every now and then, every now and then we get a nice opening day.
Though.
Well, it'd be perfect baseball weather today because it's like 70 degrees and although I think it's supposed to rain later, who knows? Yeah. Anyway, Dave, it's good to see you. How you been?
Good to see you too.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm good. Good. Doing the dues, just hanging out, living life, and recording, and things are good. I can't complain.
How's the trumpet? You get.
My trumpet is being my friend, my new friend John Ashcroft, who is if you're a trumpet player or horn player, this is the guy. He's working on my trumpet, and apparently I found out. On my trumpet, I got through a friend of David Kirshner's. He recommended, and I bought it, and I have this thing called a Stradivarius 43, 1982. So John told me all about it, and he said, I got a great year. It's a great trumpet, and he's kind of cleaning it up and making sure. The first valve was sticking, so I haven't played it in a week. I pick it up tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. I miss it.
Still waiting for that first public performance.
Yeah, it's gonna come, man. I'm learning. Hey, look, when you get a teacher, like I got a great Henry, and I had Dave giving me some lessons. Now lately, I've been formally taking some lessons from Matt Cappy, and that's been amazing.
All right.
So he's giving me some tips on some things that I never would have thought of playing the trumpet. Sometimes we just talk and the mouthpiece stuff. So it's fascinating.
I'm still waiting
stuff. For
that Hooters or In the Pocket show where you stand up from the drums, grab the trumpet, and just give us a little solo there right in the middle of the
Eric and I was over the studio one day. We were playing, and he was playing the piano, and I was playing Little Man in the Street, and we were doing it together, and he's like, we're going to do this.
All right.
We'll do it. I love it. It's fun.
Hey,
we're challenges in life.
Yes. Well, we can all the fans can look forward to hearing that, Dave.
Right on.
So, as I said, we're here at Wildfire Radio in Woodbury, New Jersey. Taylor, as always, with us on the other side. And we're brought to you again this week by our friends at CrokerPercussion.com. That's CROAKER Percussion.com. They're dedicated to creating quality, handcrafted percussion instruments with superior sound quality and unmatched craftsmanship. As I said, check them out online, CrokerPercussion.com, or give our friend Eric Metz a call at 215-669-8588. And we're also brought to you again by School of Rock Main Line in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. They're at schoolofrock.com, 610-647-2900, taking young musicians and training them to feel like rock stars. And as I've said many times, some of them will actually go on to become rock stars because they got great teachers like Dave and Wally Smith and some of the other great.
They work so hard, Andy. Like I have a nice little roster of students I give lessons to, and they're learning a progressive rock show, they have a progressive rock show they're doing. And some of the stuff they're learning is just it's impressive, man. And they come prepared and they practice, and
that must be fun for you.
It is
teaching young drummers prog rock.
Well, it's never something. I like prog rock. I like it, but it's never been my.
That's not easy. That's not easy music.
No. I mean, because it's like a lot of it is like odd time, and you have the great, you have the Bill Brufords and the Danny Careys and some of these younger cats that are playing ridiculous rhythms and the music, and I guess the godfather for me when it comes to prog rock is Robert Fripp.
Right.
One of my students right now is doing some King Crimson, and it's terrific. I have to use the app, the Amazing Slow Downer, a lot to slow down some of this stuff to listen to because it's so remarkable to learn what they're doing. And so it's for an old goat like myself, it's fun to learn and be doing it just with them because it just makes me a better player.
And it probably keeps you young working with these kids
too.
Yeah,
indeed. Yeah.
So check it out, schoolofrock.com, specifically the one in mainline Philadelphia. Again, give them a call, 610-647-2900. All right, well, speaking of rock and roll, and great music, our guest this week has been around a ton of of it through the years and played all of it. He has played all. If there's been great rock and roll at any time in the last 30 years, this man has played it on the radio.
Yeah.
He's on the line with us from his home in Doylestown. His name is Ray Koob, and if you've grown up in Philadelphia and listened to Philadelphia rock radio, you absolutely have heard his voice. And what a fucking voice it is! Say, Ray, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Hey, Ray, I bet you can't say that on WMMR. What a fucking voice that is.
You can't say it in the podcast universe.
Yeah, there you go.
What I've learned from doing the podcast that I'm on with Marcus is that we can say a lot of fucking things when nobody's ever say before.
Yeah, I love that. I was fortunate to be a guest with you guys, and I had a great hang. We recorded it over the station. It was fun. Marcus is terrific, and we've been friends for a long time, so it was a really nice hang. It flew by, and I had a really good time. And I think you've already done close to 100 of them already, right?
We just clipped 110 at our 2-year anniversary, and people who don't know, it's called The Imbalanced History of Rock and Roll. Marcus Goldman and I, Marcus in the Darkest from MMR.
Yeah.
We became friends, it's funny, from working adjacent to each other in the old Greater Media days when MGK and MMR weren't down the hall from each other. But we've known each other a long time, and we started thinking about a podcast a couple of years ago, start getting it together and put it on the air. And you were like our second interview.
I was honored.
And our first in-studio guest before the pandemic hit. And we have a thing about having drummers on, too, it seems like, because we had you on, and before that we had Jim McCarty from the Yardbirds. We've had some since then. Chris France was on us when he put his book out.
Wow.
And it's a lot of fun, man. I'll tell you talk about learning and relearning stuff. That's kind of the theme of what was our 2nd-year anniversary of the podcast. And it's out there. It started just as us on a website. And now it's on Pantheon Podcast. They've got like 60 rock podcasts, something like that.
I love them.
It's kind of
it's
fun.
cool.
I love the podcast concept. Did you ever see Mark Maron? Mark Maron, the actor, he had a podcast, and he actually
still does. It's up to like some ridiculous number of episodes.
He based his TV show off the podcast that he would do in his garage, and I thought that was just so cool. And actually, if it wasn't for Andy, I wouldn't be doing a podcast. He said, "You want to do a podcast?" And I think you said, "Do you know what a podcast is?" or something like that.
Dave, I barely knew what a podcast was.
I know.
Well, I backed into it. I backed into it when I was working at MGK. We started doing a little thing called On the Record. Which was us telling stories out of school, all the DJs, right?
Yeah.
And I was there for, 18 years. And I guess the last 3 or 4 we were doing that. And that's where I really got the concept of podcasts and how to do one.
Right.
Well,
I love it.
This one's great. You can actually there's a website for it. It's imbalancedhistory.com. And as Ray said, they have over 100 episodes. I was just listening to the last one, Ray, where you did your top 5. You and Marcus did your top 5 electric blues guitar players.
Wow.
And you, of course, cheated because you picked 4 guys at number 2, which somehow
was Stevie one? Was Stevie Ray Vaughan one of them?
He was one of both of ours.
Oh, great! Because I just watched his documentary yesterday, which was just mind blowing. And he actually we were friends, Stevie and I. So it was really nice to watch because I didn't even know there was. I caught the Little Feat documentary and I watched the Stevie documentary, and the Stevie documentary is fascinating. And that's cool that you had a list, and of course he's on it. It's great.
Well, what Andy was referring to was me gaming the system. We pick up 5. So there's nobody's ever wrong. But for I think it was my number 2. I picked the 3 Kings of the Blues. And if you're going to pick the 3 Kings of the Blues to be one of your favorites, which I did, Stevie has to be their greatest offspring in some regard. For a lot of people. Anyway.
Who are the other ones that you picked? Because I can see it here.
Well, nobody tops the Hook, John Lee Hooker.
I'm with you there.
And we did an episode about Rocket 88. There's the theory out there, and I see the point about how that song really launched rock and roll into the mainstream. And one of the pieces of evidence that it's an NPR station from out west. I think they're from Spokane. They put it forward that Boogie Chillin' was one of the main elements in the cocktail that led to rock and roll. That's why I call him Super Spreader of the Blues, ladies and gentlemen. Johnny. I loved him. We both love Muddy Waters, and he came at it as a younger guy from a different angle.
Right.
He had a friend who turned him on to Muddy, and I just kind of learned about it probably around the same time you guys were learning about the blues as kids from the suburbs, and you know, his influence and his role in creating rock and roll from the early days.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff, I love Buddy Guy. That's
me too.
And we both had Stevie on our list there.
Yeah.
So, but good stuff. You know, we have fun with that kind of stuff. It's something where we learn and dig in and then express it.
Right.
But we do a thing we call 5 favorites. I told Marcus it could be its own podcast because it could be applied to anything. So we're working on stuff like that.
Yeah, I like that.
But
I like that idea.
Just mainly working on living life and like you guys.
Adjusting.
Trying to work on the podcast and working in general through the pandemic.
Right.
I've been lucky enough to be back at the place where we first met, Dave.
Yeah, MMR.
MMR. I've been back for a couple of years now.
And you were on last night, right? You did. It's amazing that you're here today because you did the overnight.
Wait, you did the overnight last night, right? Oh, I didn't realize that. So what are you working on? Like 3 hours of sleep?
At best.
4, but who's counting? Kendall would say, "Pussy."
Charlie Kendall. We were talking about our old friend, the legendary program director Charlie Kendall, who before we went on.
I just genuflected. When you say the name, you must genuflect.
Exactly.
And if you're in a bar, you have to take.
Oh man, what a hellraiser! And I mean, what a voice, Charlie Kendall. WMM. I can't do it, but he had the great voice and you know he helped the Hooters so much back in the day, and him and I. We did some heavy party, and I also mentioned a DJ, another guy, Tom Robinson, who we used to sometimes go out and not be home for a few days.
One of the original Nighthawks, by the way.
Oh, yes.
The Nighthawk kind of took life with Tom and Lynn Kratz and then Bubba.
Yeah.
And it changed over the years. But that was like the MMR late night thing, back when everybody was on the radio late at night, not just, 3 stations in town.
Yeah.
And in fact... Rob Ellis was on WIP last night, and he and I were private messaging each other.
Oh,
about,
yeah.
Hey, nice to talk to the other live body today.
Yeah, man. What a good guy that guy is.
Yeah, that's
I
a great.
love him.
That's
sports talk.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ray, that you bring up. Now, it's most stations overnight, I guess, now just do pre-recorded, right? There's no or automated, however they do it. There's very few stations that still have overnight guys. Is that kind of the way the business is now?
I think that song, "The Last DJ," the people that do overnight radio that's not news or sports oriented are become fewer and further between. I don't even know how many are left when it comes. You look around the country, and that's when I think of some of those guys that we were just talking about, and they're both keeping it going 24/7, around the clock every day.
It's so cool. It's so cool that MMR still does. When we had Pierre on, on a year or so ago, and he was saying that how.
Day in the morning.
Yes, 24 hours. 24-hour DJs. I mean, MMR is one of the few stations that.
If you travel the country, if you've been around the world, MMR is so unique. Like there just aren't stations. They just not like they're unique in so many ways. But we just don't have stations like that anymore. We used to have a lot of them back in the day, and they do not exist anymore. So it's
here's a good example, David. When you're up at 2:30 in the morning and you want to hear a certain song, you can call.
Yeah.
And last night's a good example. I had planned to play a Zeppelin song at some point, and somebody called and asked for something else. I'm plugging their ID in and playing that one instead. And you're always able to do that.
Yeah.
And be a voice to more than a voice for people in the night. You be there, and when they need somebody to call, that's one of the things that radio does. When you need somebody to talk to, there's usually somebody there in the booth. Well, there used to be always somebody there in the booth everywhere, and it's a little different now. But one of the things I think that keeps MMR vital in the overnight is we get all the fun crazies that hang out with us all night. And it does. It makes it fun.
Yeah, I bet. Oh,
that must have been so cool for you, Ray. Obviously, you worked at MG. You were at MMR in the '80s. You got your start, I guess, with DeBella, right? You were working with DeBella when you first got there.
Right.
And then you did your rockers show. So you were there at MMR pretty much all through the '80s. Then you get the MGK gig. Well, we're jumping ahead to 2002. You get the MGK gig, and you're there for 16 years, and you become a fixture at that point of Philly. Every night 6 o'clock, Ray Koob and the College of Classic Rock Knowledge. That was you, right? That was your thing.
Well, it was. We did that as a station, but we did that, and we revived Get the Lead Out, which Bubba had started at MMR back in the 80s. And the PD and I developed a little block of a band that's pretty near and dear to Philadelphia that we did every night too. Jonesin' for the Stones.
That's right.
Because everybody at the end of their day needed a block of the Stones. So those kind of things made fun there, and the people there working at MGK made it so much fun. Yeah. But we did jump fast forward there to.
Right, we'll get into the middle, what happened in the '90s too, and I want to talk about.
No, I don't want to talk about that.
But so anyway, so you're there at MGK for 16 years. You become, you already were established in Philly, but now you're set. You got a daily show at 6 o'clock every night, and then the reality of the business. Same thing happened to me in 2018. I was at the newspaper for 30 years. I got laid off. Actually like a month after you did. And so now you're a man without a ship, so to speak, and then you land back at WMMR part time, but still to be back on MMR after your history in Philadelphia and with rock radio, that must have been to get that opportunity again, it must have been amazing for you.
Well, there's a long story that goes with that, but in the short of it, basically they were finding themselves needing some hands to make things work the way that MMR always works.
Right.
And Bill Weston said to me, "Hey, how do you feel about maybe doing some shifts on MMR? Chuck could use some help, and he could use a veteran hand like you." So here I am a couple years later doing it. I'm on this week because Brent Porsche, who is usually on, they call it the red eye now, which you're rocking the red eye. It's a lot more fun to play with, so to speak. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. That didn't sound right either. But it's really fun to fill in for him because there are so many people. I call them the irregulars who are up every night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, checking in. Right. And it makes it more fun. And he's in covering for Preston and Steve. They're off for the best stuff. Now, that's irrelevant to the people who are listening to this weeks from now, which is why I'm learning to do this podcast thing in a way that, you don't always refer to today, tomorrow, hey, a lot of the things because everything changes and you want the podcast to be evergreen. But your thing, guys, I meant to say this at the beginning. You guys make it so relaxed for your guests. That's one of the most important things you ever do in an interview. And Davey, you've been interviewed a bunch of times. Yeah. Andy, you've interviewed people to get people relaxed, and that's when the magic happens here on the podcast on your thing, because everybody's just talking, and sometimes they tell tales out of school or dance around something they probably shouldn't talk about.
like I did last week.
Did last time.
I did it last week with Cornetti, and it was incredible. I said, and I'm not going to do it again. But last week I started telling a story about a friend of mine that would do some crazy stuff, and then I found myself afterwards going, "Can we edit that out?" But that's just the beauty of the podcast.
I'm going to guess, Dave, you didn't take any shit for that.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
You're good. I knew you'd be good.
Cornetti was really
well. I like 2 weeks ago, or the show before that, Dave, where you out of nowhere confessed your story about doing a high school gymnastics meet while on LSD. That was a good.
Well, let me tell you, I'm doing LSD right now. No, I'm kidding.
No, but Ray, I do appreciate that. We do try to keep it very loose and kind of, as I say, go where the conversation leads.
Yeah.
And it's just a few people sitting around talking music. I mean, how much more relaxed can that be, right? I mean,
but
when you've been around a while, same thing with our podcast. When you've been around a while, you've talked to enough people and learned enough things, and you have enough of those connections, and you pull it all together, and you find yourself pretty busy. And your show is obviously stacked with some great guests, and you guys do really you have that chemistry, which I think is most important.
It's Levittown.
It is.
It's our connection, our Bucks County roots.
Well, I didn't grow up there, but I worked there for years.
Yeah,
I worked
exactly.
there for years. So yeah.
But you know what? Here's the thing, Andy. I never asked the question, but I just, because you worked at the Courier Times, right? Or did writing there for a long time. I just assumed because John
Fisher. Well, he was a Levittown guy.
Yeah, a Levittown guy.
One of my favorite writers.
Yeah, what a sweet guy.
Speaking of Bucks County and Levittown, let's go back to Ray's roots, because we are
Doylestown, right?
Well, he lives in Doylestown now, but you grew up in in Levittown or Fairless Hills? Did you grow up?
Me? Well, we moved to Southampton when I was a little kid.
Okay.
Went to the Centennial School System, William Tennant and stuff. Lived and graduated from there. Lived around the area, and then for 20 years I lived in South Jersey, halfway between Philly and Atlantic City, and the last several years here in Doylestown is kind of nice, guys. To be back.
Or as my dad used to call it, Doylestown. That's right. We're going to Doylestown.
Or as I call it, Doylestown Mountain, because it's always 4 degrees cooler up here.
Yeah.
You know, you could come out and they can be like, it's not too bad. It feels all right. You come up here, the wind's whipping, and you're freezing your ass off.
You got a great drum shop there in Doylestown, by the way, which I got to get over to check out. But I see stuff online at Instagram and Facebook, and they always have some great vintage drums there. So I got to get out there.
There's a couple stores around this area for musical instruments in general that are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not all of them are on the map.
Right.
Well, you got Siren Records up there too, which is a great record store.
Great resource.
Hey, so Ray,
quick story.
Go ahead,
Ray.
Ray.
Quick story. We're all friends with Chip Roberts and Debbie Calton.
Yeah.
And one of those things just jumped into my head. There's a guy. And I think he stopped doing it, but he had a whole barn full of classic instruments. And somehow Debbie, for Chip's birthday one year, and this is just a few years ago, found this Dano Electric for him that he really loved. It was beautiful. It was
wow.
purple flake, right?
Wow.
And so we went out to pick it up for Deb so I could bring it into work to, get it to Chip surreptitiously.
Right.
And and it was really cool because you pull up this little, stone path and you get out, you kind of wander around, ring the bell. He comes out of the house, coffee in hand, and you're inside and looking around. And it's just like, that's the kind of stuff you can find in Bucks County, like that you don't see just everywhere, I guess. But in some of the shops, though, there's a couple of them in town that are really great, too, for musicians. And we have a great arts community here. The food's great. The restaurant scene's really, really fun to enjoy here. But we have a lot of great artists and a lot of great musicians that live in the Doylestown area, including my friend Annie Haslam, who I'm overdue to have on our podcast.
No kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
Renaissance, yes.
Yeah. Wow. She's living in that area. I didn't know.
Oh, yeah. She's been there for years.
Well, I remember like New Hope. I thought there, but very cool.
So, Ray, when you were growing up, I read somewhere, or maybe it was on your bio, that you started the radio station at your high school at William Tannen. Is that the case?
Me and a couple other guys and our AV coordinator at the time, Ed Calhoun. Yeah. It was one of those in-circuit jobs, just in and this is how you know when I went to high school, because it was in the cafeteria, the hallways, and the smoking alley.
So you knew, like at an early age, because my experience with a guy that wanted to be in radio, a DJ, was our paper boy, Kevin Fennessy. He used to deliver papers at my house, and I remember when he'd say collecting, and he had this radio, and he would practice his radio delivery. Yeah, and I think his brother Eddie went into radio, but I was really young. I think he was maybe a year or two older than me, but he'd come to the house and. He was, I forget what paper he was working for, but he was collecting on behalf of some radio station he was about to work for someday.
So did he get a radio?
I think he did. I think he ended up, but that's how he would rehearse his radio voice. Because one day I heard him really talk, and I said, that's not the guy that's collecting off of my parents. It's a different dude.
But with you, Ray, did you always, because you have a voice, you just have a natural voice for radio, and obviously you have to work at it to perfect it, but it helps to have that voice. So did you know from a real young age that this is something you wanted to do? You were saying before the show that your dad had the voice as well.
You had to recognize it, though. You had to really wait a minute.
Yeah. I get that from people. Like, you sound a lot like your dad, and I guess I resemble him a little bit. I've had a couple of the older relatives give me that look, like, wait a minute, which one of them's in the room?
Oh, wow.
But no, a guy that was like the older brother in the neighborhood where I grew up in Southampton, after I'd gotten into radio and was working at MMR, he told someone, and it got back to me. I thought it was hysterical. He said, I knew him when he couldn't even talk.
I usually get that.
Well, at Tennant, we were lucky. We had a media program within the English department that not only would it allow us to start a radio station, but I was able to do television, believe it or not. We had a weekly news program that we worked on, and that was done, but that started before I was there, and I don't know how much longer it continued, but I know other people came out of it, and a lot of really good, talented people came out of doing that little in-house radio and TV type thing there. Steve Kappas went on to be the president of NBC News.
Right. Was he there when you were there?
Bruce Gordon, just retired from Channel 29. He was a reporter there and in Chicago for years. He was part of it right after me. Yeah, and Steve right around that time too.
How about that?
Yeah, it's a neat little thing that was going on back then, and it gave us all an opportunity to see if it was something we really wanted to do. And for me, that's really when it started. And then they got a low power FM up there. It's still there, 89.3 in Hatboro, but it's all different than it was when we were kids.
Yeah.
So but that's kind of like how I got into it. And at some point, I realized when I dropped the register. I was talking about Kendall. The
battling deep end.
So we'd all see. How low is it compared to Charlie?
Right, Charlie.
And the story is that Philadelphia that everybody talked. You get Philadelphia came after a really rough night out on the town. I was like, all right,
that was every night back in the day.
Let's use the ragged voice. Well, particular one, and he went in and laid it down a couple times, and then went to bed, I guess, and then came back, and it was really great. Charlie will tell you the whole story if you ever get him on here.
I'd love to.
Oh yeah, he's doing it. He's still around, man. Still doing it.
I'm gonna reach out.
I got to tell you something. There's one thing that I've kicked around the last couple of years that hasn't happened, and I hope it does at some point. And I know he's listening because he's a fan of yours and he's a fan of the podcast. The Ruben, Frank, and I.
Yeah, you know what?
I'm really good friends. Over the last
Ruben
years.
has actually played with. I've had Ruben out to play with in the pocket a couple times.
Right.
Yeah, he's played keyboards, and he's a dedicated musician. Which I always ask Ruben. I said, where do you find time to kind of work on your chops and stuff? Because he's always so entrenched in what's happening in Philadelphia sports, and he's like he's my go-to guy with the Eagles and any questions, but he can play. So yeah, at some point we got to get.
I know where Ray was going. So finish your story, Ray, then I'll say something about Ruben too. But I know where you're going to go, Ray.
Well, he and I were shooting the shit, and he said, I'm a sports reporter who loves and lives for rock and roll. You're a rock and roll guy who loves and lives for sports. We should do a show together or a podcast together and call it Ruben Coob. And actually, a couple of programming types went, hey, wait a minute. That's pretty good.
It's real good.
So
before they got that was right before they got laid off.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the Ruben Coop has not happened yet, because I saw you guys talking about that on social media. So and I was like, did I miss that? But no, it has not happened yet.
No, but life's not over yet either,
Yeah.
But I was just saying, Dave, about Ruben. You talk about his keyboards chops. I worked with Ruben for years at the paper because we both started at the well, he got a job before that, but we worked together at the Burlington County Times in the 80s. Then I went over to Bucks County, but we were covering a high school track meet somewhere in central Jersey, and we're back at the hotel afterwards, and there's a piano in the lobby of the hotel. And Ruben, we've been out drinking for a few hours after the meet, and Ruben sits down at the piano, and he just starts playing, just kick ass, rock and roll on the piano, and everybody. It was very cool. This would have been 1, 2 in the morning, and Ruben's rocking.
And nobody knew that he had this.
I guess we knew that he could play, but it was like, wow, that's pretty good. So
that's great when that happens,
And don't forget that he was a pretty damn good runner when it came to track.
Yes,
I see the pictures of that, and it's funny is I didn't know. I knew that he covered sports. I didn't know that he was actually a really accomplished athlete too.
I didn't know that. That's something. That's great.
Well, we look forward to the premiere of the Ruben Coob show at some point.
Yeah.
Hey, Ray. So I want to again. I saw this on your bio, and you just mentioned it in passing. And I don't know. Maybe you've talked about this a lot. You were actually in New York City on 9/11.
I was.
And you said you made you referenced that this kind of brought you back to Philadelphia. Do you mind telling that story or?
Well, yeah, I was working for. It's funny. I hadn't thought about it or wasn't thinking about it, and then as soon as you mentioned it, you know what happens? I go right back to that morning.
Yeah.
In my head, and
what a day.
I was working at 41st in Lexington, working for a record company for a good friend of mine, and doing that long commute into and out of New York. But in the music business, you're on the road a lot too. So, and it was just another beautiful morning on the train on the way in, and to preserve battery, which we had to back then. I turned my phone off, put it in the bag.
Yeah.
Went through that whole. I know you, Dave. You going in and out of New York. You go into the tunnel and you come out somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I come out, and I'm coming out by the coffee shop across from my office in Midtown, and every emergency vehicle and cop in the city is heading down Lexington Avenue.
Oh my God!
Emergency breakneck spin. I'm like, what's going on?
Oh.
And I'm standing, and I'm like, what the hell is going on in there? And I walk in. and I'm getting a coffee, and a woman who's about 5'4" in a impeccable business suit walks in, and while she's waiting for her coffee, turns to me and says, "You can't fucking tell me there's 2 planes sticking out of the World Trade Center and we're not being attacked." And I looked at her and said, "What?"
Wow.
Because I literally walked up from underground, walked in the coffee shop, noticed that something was going on, and then went in the office. And I was in there, in our office. We didn't have much access, I could say. And our main window to the world that morning was the radio, and that meant that Howard Stern was telling us what was going on.
That's how I found out.
20, 25 blocks away. We didn't see it. I didn't see what happened until I finally got back to my house that evening.
Right. Which I'm surprised you got back that evening.
It didn't look good.
Yeah.
It didn't look good. And there, obviously, we checked on, make sure everybody, as they came in the office, we were reporting back to the CEO, who was based in New York, and the president of the label, who was based in Raleigh, North Carolina, letting them know that everyone was there. The only thing we had was AOL Instant Messenger. Can you believe that shit? It's the only way we could communicate.
Yeah.
So we got through the day, and once we were sure that all the skies were clear, I told him I'm going to take the shot. And I walked across town. It was the weirdest thing. It was like that movie, The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah.
The street was empty. There was nobody in the streets. There wasn't much going on. And I get there, and I'm standing in the street with 1,000 other people waiting for them to let you into the train station. And I'm looking around, and I'm looking to my left, and I'm looking to my right.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing guys with soot on their suits.
Oh, shit.
And you realize that they had come from down there, or that they had at least hit by the cloud,
Yeah.
And so eventually they give the all clear. They're checking the station, and we get on the train, and we're leaving town. And I end up sitting next to a guy who was older than me, probably by about 10 years, well-dressed man wearing a suit, and he's got soot on his shoulder. And I just kind of said, "You okay?"
Yeah.
And he said, and then he told me his story, which was that he worked for the New York State Supreme Court, a few blocks from the World Trade Center, and stood on the roof of the building they were in as the whole thing went down. His story was there wasn't a sound in the train. You could have heard someone sniffle 10 rows away. Everyone was listening to the guy. It was one of those moments.
Right.
And that's where I was in the middle of all that.
Wow.
And I got home. I tell you what, you never hug your wife and kids so hard as when you get home, something like that.
Oh.
And it made me realize that maybe going to New York every day wasn't the thing for me. Yeah. And it led me around to an opportunity to join MGK.
Right.
And I did that happily and gladly, as one of the best teams lineups in radio that I've seen ever.
Yeah.
Working with DeBella and Debbie and Andre, of course, and all the other people too. But that it was a lot. It led me back, and I didn't know it was leading me to that. Something that I really enjoyed doing for so long.
Oh. Wow.
Crazy that it's been 20. It's going to be 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't.
Thinking about it.
Yeah, 20 years this year. Yeah, it's crazy.
It stuns me still when you were telling your story. It just like that day, and I was living in San Diego at the time.
Right.
So
what was it like out there?
we saw it on the TV. I remember my sister called and said, "Put on the TV." I was managing music for MP3.com at the time, and I was getting up and I was ready to drive to the office, which was near Del Mar, and I was living in East County, and I was about to go, and my sister told me to put on the TV, and I saw. I think I didn't see the initial. I saw the second plane go into the.
Well, it would have been 6 a.m. out there. You would have been sound asleep. This is what you would have woken up to.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God.
It was horrible, and I remember driving. I went to the office, because I didn't, because we never experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
And I pulled up when there were people in our lot, and I remember there was one girl in marketing who said, "Well, we going to work today?" Like, no. Because it took a while for it to sink into everybody, like what's happening. And then all of a sudden, the fear of right up, I guess 90 miles from where I was the San Onofre power plant, a nuclear plant. So there was all this talk of there was fear that a plane was going to go into that plant. So it was a scary time, and that day still, like, I still can't believe it. And you know what's really amazing about that is when America came together. We came like when tragedy hits something that at that magnitude, we all came together, like everybody, no matter like right, left, whatever, everybody came together. I just well, what a day, and everything changed after that. I mean, getting on a plane nowadays is just, I have friends of mine that do, like Mickey Carey was on the show, who was like a big-time session drummer. He doesn't get on a plane anymore. I said, every change is like rarely will, he dreads that. I mean, if Brian goes on tour, he'll do it. But, it changed everything for a lot of people. They had to, like you decided to go back to Philadelphia. It just changes everybody's mindset on how they're going to live their lives.
I was before that. I was working and living in North Carolina, and I used to be able to pull up to the airport.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And in Raleigh, then it's changed there since then.
Oh man.
There was a strip of grass. You pulled up. You pulled in. There was the drop off lane, and you'd loop around. There was this, and you walked across a strip of grass. You could park your car right there, walk across right into the terminal, no problem. I could leave the house an hour before my flight, no problem. And you think about what it's like now.
Oh.
And Dave, you probably traveled a lot.
Oh my God, it changed some. Do you remember the show Rockline? Do you remember Rockline with oh God, who was the guy? Ted Coburn. Was a guy named Coburn?
Bob Coburn.
So Rob and I were there was a bad connection. We ended up in Denver, and we had to run to catch our flight. Now think about security these days, but we're running through to the gate, and the door closed, and we're banging on the door. You got to let us in because we had to be in the valley somewhere, and they were like, they opened the door and let us in. Like there was no security, virtually.
All right, I'm going to tell a story that I've never publicly confessed. About an airport story pre 9/11.
Okay. Yeah.
Wait a minute, we need some kind of a special sounder. This is where I would go and find a sound effect.
They can't fire me now because they've already fired me.
Okay.
So 1993, I'm covering the Phillies. I'm covering the World Series against Toronto.
Yeah.
So the morning of Game 6, I was had a 9 a.m. flight to fly out to Toronto for Game 6.
Yeah.
I was out drinking at home with my buddies till 3 in the morning.
Woke
up. I set my alarm for 6:30. Woke up at 8 o'clock for a 9 o'clock flight. I live a half hour from the airport.
Oh my God.
Oh my.
So I threw a bag, drove to airport, and made it onto the plane for like with 2 minutes to spare. Well, maybe we have to see. So I had visions of either A, getting fired, or B, driving to Toronto.
I mean, you could do that back then. I had similar coming back from Europe, and I always had a connecting flight, flying to Philly, connecting flight. I'd be late. I'd be the last guy on coming in from another kick. And I remember one time there was again, the door already closed, and I pleaded my case, and I got on. That would never happen today. That just doesn't happen anymore, So that's what we got to thank that horrible day and what happened. But we need that security as much as. Because there's some sickos out there, Ray, that want to do crazy shit, and unfortunately they want it. They have it out for us.
So we've learned. And I noticed that my kids have grown up in the era since then. They remember it. They're in their 20s now, but there's a whole generation or two of kids coming up who don't remember travel before that. So it's all. Hey man, time goes by, things change. We kind of get used to it. If you get to be an old dog, and not everybody is entitled. Or gets there. So, Dave, we've got many friends between us that are many in common that aren't here with us now, right?
Yeah. Sure.
And we ain't that old, partner.
No. I mean, look, I hear you, and every day, like I woke up today before I came here. I have a studio in my house, and there's a track that I wanted to cut. And I cut it this morning, and it's just like. I don't know what's happened, but maybe turning 65 when I was driving to the studio, I went, man, I am so fucking lucky that I get to do this. I still get to play, and the guy I was working with is in Germany, and I hit him up. Hey, I sent you a track. It's just the things that you just don't. At least I'm not. We're not taken for granted anymore. It's like I think there's some stuff that even through this COVID period, this whole year and a half of. A year. It feels like a year and a half already that we've been dealing with change. It feels like 10 years, right? Like the connection with people and just having dinner with somebody and for the first time, I was at I had to go to a Costco the other day, and it's the first time of the year. I don't know if any of you guys have ever forgotten your mask, but I had my mask mask with me, and I didn't put it on. I went to walk in, and the guy in the front looks at me and goes, and I went, "Oh shit!" And I put the mask on. I said, and that's the first time that's happened. It was like, oh my God, I think I was listening to too much, like, because I was pretty careful all the time, but it's the first time I forgot to put it on when I was walking in. I got yelled at.
Yeah, well.
And rightly so.
It happens.
It happens.
Hey, let's get back to talking some music.
Yeah.
Ray, so
Okay.
I don't know how we narrow this down for you, because I asked you this in advance and you didn't really give me a specific name. But you have met so many people through your years in radio. I'm sure some of your favorite all-time musicians. You've probably gotten to hang out backstage, I'm sure. Are there any holy shit moments for you throughout your career? One that stands out as, holy shit, I'm hanging out backstage with this guy or this woman. I mean,
or you're face to face with that person, because we've all had that experience. You're face to face with that person that isn't real until you see it, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. Are there any of those moments that stand out for you? Because I know you've had a bunch.
Well, there are. First off, let's pull back the curtain a little bit, because Dave, you understand this. You've been in the middle of this as well as an attendee. The whole scene backstage is not quite always what people put it in their mind.
Exactly.
It's a lot of times, and you guys have done this when you're on tour. The record company or the management has something set up, and you go to meet as many people as you can with the time that you have.
Right.
And in a big venue, that happens. Like in the bowels of the Spectrum was famous for that.
Yeah.
So it's funny because you meet so many people at one point, it just starts to become a blur.
Right.
Because I was the promotion kid at MMR when I first started. When I met you, Dave, we did the school spirit contest together at Medford High School.
And man, was that ever successful, man?
Oh my God.
I mean, you guys had to rent another place to put the school spirit thing cards, right?
We had to take just a quick sidebar, but I want to make sure that I get back to this. There was a place where we stored a lot of our promotional items down on Washington Avenue. Right. And at one point, Jack and I were hauling them out by Jack Quigley and I were hauling them out by the van load every weekend. We went, we're going to come up with another fucking place to put these things. We're running out of room at 19th and Walnut. So we found this place that we already had storage in, and we just rented another unit. Then we had to go and hire the rock and roll accounting law firm. I forget the name of the guys, but they were like, yeah, we got this. We could do this. Yeah. And they actually took over the accounting because we couldn't possibly have kept up with what happened in the avalanche.
Amazing.
But
we took a photo for Rolling Stone. I think it's Rolling Stone magazine. We took a photo in there, because it was just, it just kind of snowballed, and nobody expect that kind of.
My high school won one year. Cherry Hill West won in 1980. Yeah, that's when we met, Dave. When you guys played Cherry Hill West, that was we got the Hooters to play the high school. Yeah.
Well, we'd end up booking gigs with a lot of the high schools because there was just this response.
Excellent.
And,
Sure.
it was good. And thanks, because you guys did so much for us, building a buzz, and I mean, it was just a great thing. I mean, the people in New York at Columbia and Records, they all heard about this amazing promotion, and it just helped us signing a deal and doing what we did.
It's funny how it happens. That's rock and roll, right?
Right. Exactly.
Well, part of rock and roll is taken when you work at the station. If you're the promotion guy or the assistant promotion guy, you get to take people backstage, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of quickly got into it. And kind of like, okay, this is cool, right? Okay,
right.
Hey, here's our 10 winners and their 10 guests, and here's John Mellencamp. Hey, he's really a nice guy.
Yeah.
Here's Phil Collins, also an incredibly nice guy.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple situations that I've been able to be in the middle of.
Yeah.
That were pretty mind blowing to me. One was. I used to be really good friends with Sharon Osbourne. I know she'll remember me, but she set me up on that dirty old couch backstage at the Tower Theater with me and Ozzy for an hour.
Wow.
Oh my!
Wow!
I was sitting. This is 1991ish.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there, and we had plenty of batteries, plenty of tape, and I'm rolling. And at one point, about 15, 20 minutes in, she comes in over Ozzy's shoulder. I see her poke her head in. How the boys doing in there? Saw we were doing fine. 45 minutes later, we're done. And it ended up being a 3-part episode of The Rocker Show.
Right.
With and bonded me to him in a way. I'm like, there's no way I'm not going to be like an Aussie defender until the end of time now.
Yeah.
He's such a way cooler guy than most people realize.
Oh yeah.
So that was pretty. That was pretty astounding. That moment, but how can you minimize when you meet a Beatle, right?
Yeah, I know.
I got to meet Ringo at the first All-Star tour, and it was crazy. It was like that scene in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure where they introduce all the figures from history. You know, hi, I'm Levon Helm.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Hi, I'm Randy Brecker. Right down the line, Clarence Clements, Joe Walsh. How you doing? Right, everybody.
Joe. Yeah. Wow.
And I'm with this woman. There's one winner. And she's just flipping out because she's meeting all these people moving down the row with me, right? And finally, we get to the end, and she
Ringo.
said, Ringo, first off, how great it is to meet you for me, and very nice to meet you, and all that. Right. But we had a winner, and just very excited to be here and have an opportunity to meet you. And he just reaches across me and says, "And you are?" And she freezes, and she goes, "Oh, God!"
It's a Beatle.
Double handshakes her. Says, "I've always wanted to meet you."
Wow.
That's my Ringo story.
Oh, that's great.
That has stuck with me like yesterday for all these years.
Wow.
What a great guy. What an amazing human.
Yeah, they all were. I mean, I never met Ringo. I met George and Paul. Of course, you know, when I went John, that'll never happen. But that was, you know, they're amazingly kind and nice people. And you know, I think I met George a few years before he passed away too, and just remarkable. Ray, I have it on video too, which is pretty cool. I could go back to it once in a while to see it. You know,
I can't even imagine. You know, having video of it. So.
Yeah. That's cool that you did that. But you were doing doing promotion for the radio, so it happened. You were always seeing somebody that was like, you know, selling tickets, doing shows. So this was a regular occurrence, you know.
It was an unbelievable space to be in. Yeah. Jack really taught me the ropes, showed me the ropes and how things went. Yeah. But to be inside MMR at that era and be, you know, able to go to do all these things, that was one thing. And it was also the things that we got away with when it came to what we could do promotionally and what we were doing in the streets of Philly. Like the Louie Louie parade is a perfect example. How it started as like a crazy notion. Hey, let's have a parade and everybody has to play Louie Louie. And that's the kind of stuff that Bella would always cook up, right?
Right.
And it turns into an actual parade on an actual street. And, you know, you say, you know, like the Talking Head song, how did I get here? What the hell? But, you know, that was part of the aura of MMR. From the outside, I can't imagine. But to be part of the team that was doing all these crazy things that had never been done before was kind of fun. And that included the whole school spirit thing and many other.
Yeah. Oh, so many great things.
We sent a guy on tour with Bruce Springsteen on the Born in the USA era tour, the big stadium tour. Yeah. And we're still friends 35 years later.
He's trying to get tickets for the next one.
John. He's
wonderful.
a great guy, John Adair. Yeah.
Wow.
But he was a kid then, and he phoned in from all over at all hours to the station, which was kind of neat too. You know.
That is. So wait, so the contest was every show on the tour, every show of the stadium leg of the tour?
They went on tour?
He went on tour for like 10 days.
Wow, that's awesome.
Leading up to Philly.
That's awesome. Hey, Ray, I saw online a photo, speaking of that era of the 80s at MMR, I saw a great photo of you online with the guys from Van Halen. And I know Eddie was obviously pretty special to you.
Tragic. It's, you know, terrible. You got to meet him a few times then, right, Eddie?
Yeah. Again, that job got me into a lot of places. You know, you find yourself in the dressing rooms at the Spectrum with all kinds of people in those days. And it was the Sammy era. I hadn't been able to score a ticket to see them with Dave. That's how hot it was before he left, you know. Right. And so I started going and seeing them all the time, and that puts you in that circle. And was in California one time for something else, and Warner Brothers says, "Hey, we're going to see Van Halen tonight. You want to go?" Sure, why not? You know, those kind of things. And the Monsters of Rock. Yeah. At the old JFK in '88, that show was huge.
I was there while I went on. Yeah.
Yeah, I probably saw you there.
Yeah, I remember. I was just telling the story last week. Tony Santora and I went and Frank Barcelona saw us with Barbara Skydell, who was the agent who invited us on stage, and I remember being up there. And oh man, I think who was the support band was the German band
Scorpions.
Scorpions,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Right? You were there, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was Kingdom Come, remember
Right.
them?
Yeah, sure.
And then Metallica's first big stage in Philly.
Right. Right.
In fact, standing on the side of the stage watching them with Ted Utz, and it's crazy what's going on, right? The front 5,000 people are losing their shit.
Yeah.
Girls are flashing their tits out of their
Yeah.
leather vests, and all kinds of crazy stuff's going on.
Right.
Ted turns to me and goes, "Coob, I think we're missing something here." And about a month later, we started doing the Rocker Show, which played a lot of hard rock, heavy metal, and was able to break a lot of bands in that 88 to 92, 3, 4 era.
Right.
It was a lot of fun doing that show. Doing that was a whole nother. I think there's a book just about me.
That's an interesting thing that you just brought up, because I who was I last week when we were talking about how overnight music changed. Like I was living in California, and I played on a record that was big support from the record label Giant Records. It was one of their priorities, and I play on the Soul Kitchen record, and I remember we were listening.
I remember that record,
right? And we're listening to at a record release party, private thing that we had going on, and Pete Robinson, I think he was working for Giant at the time before he went to RCA. I think that was the label he went to. He played a new record by a band called Nirvana. And I remember the faces on everybody that with the new record went, wah, wah, like, uh-oh, music. And like overnight, it seemed like there was a Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana, just everything. And so I guess when I'm in radio, like there's kind of things like one day, does it, like somebody come in and go, hey, formats, you've always been a rock station, but rock has their genres and their sounds.
Right.
Do you remember any of those like changes where like, wow, man, just last week we were like, you're always going to have the Stones, you're going to have the Led Zeppelins, but you see how the music changes sometimes and what tastes are. Right.
Well, there was somebody that was posting something. It might have been Vinny, my buddy Vinny, that posted it. Was it might have, or no, it was somebody from the business was posting something from R&R's rock chart 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And they were remarking about how few of those records were still in rotation anywhere, and how many of the bands and all that kind. It was one of those kind of threads, right?
Yeah.
And I realized that what was going on by 1991 was different, way different than it was going to be in just a couple of years.
Right.
And you said something that was very true. They appeared to all arrive together and overnight. Well, Bad Motorfinger and Nevermind, Soundgarden and Nirvana records were released on the same day. The Temple of the Dog record was released earlier as a tribute to Andrew Wood from Mother Love Bone. Right. That got focused and re-promoted once all this stuff happened. But it did kind of happen all around that point in 1991.
Yes.
That it started to, and STP came out in that window as well, the first record, and it did. There are stories. I remember you mentioned Columbia. I remember a story. I was friends with Warrant, and they went in for cherry pie.
Right.
It was cherry pie.
Yeah.
And when they came back for the meeting for their next record, everything was Alice in Chains.
Yes.
Janie told me, he's like, dude, I knew that. The writing was on the wall.
Yeah.
And I think he said that in a lot of interviews when he was still with us.
Yeah.
But because of that time, right before that, those couple of years, and even in a little bit of the time after that, I got to be friends with a lot of people who are in this new book. Have you heard about this? It's called Nothing But a Good Time. And it's by two guys who did all these interviews. And it's like a rock and roll documentary book where they're sitting around talking about the Strip in L.A.
I got to check it out.
From the 70s in Starwood.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds great.
Whiskey.
I love those stories. It was great. Yeah.
It's great.
You haven't lived until you got into Starwood. And like, I went in there one night and it was a punk show. I thought I was going to lose my life. I walked in there and, it was like Black Flag was playing. Black Flag, China White, I forget, there were 4 like heavy duty punk bands. I remember the guy that always hangs around Venice with the roller skates was skating around there, and then it got packed, and then they were just slam dancing like I've never seen before. But I mean, I'd love to read that book. That book sounds fascinating to me because,
I think we got an advanced copy. We're going to talk to the 2 guys. It's Tom Bourgeot.
Yeah,
and
love to check that out.
Beanstalk.
Wow.
So we'll be talking to them. Eric, I think his first name is the 2 guys. So we're going to be talking to them on the podcast and interviewing them about it. And it's weird to be like, I know 40 of the people in the book and learn stuff by reading it already. Like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah. Whereas we'd like to say on the Imbalanced History of Rock and Roll, what?
Well, we were back that whole change thing. I was living in L.A. and I remember I got hired to record this Alice Cooper record, and he recorded this record called The Last Temptation. Here's how weird it was. I remember Andy Wallace was producing some of it, Barron and Perdol produced some of it, and Tom, the guy from a band called, I think it was called Gumball. So they couldn't even figure out, like, I ended up playing on the whole record, but it was 3 different producers because I don't think they really knew what exactly they were going to do, but it ended up being pretty cool. But it was 1992. And, it was just a very, and I thought, because I moved from Philly to live in the West Coast, it was just me, but there was a whole change going on, like musically, and I was, experiencing that on a creative level, watching an artist do that, and it was wild, and it must have been fascinating at radio too to see what was going on.
Well, I was there like on the weekends at MMR. I was working for Freddie Dean over at Friday Morning Quarterback for like 7 years, and I would work weekends at MMR. So I worked for Joe Bonadonna was the program director there for most of that time, and there in the 90s. And I watched Joe initially go, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
To embracing it and finding ways to bond the old MMR and the new MMR together. And my show was kind of like the melding point there. And it was kind of neat because he knew the path to take. Yeah. So he took it.
Smart.
I just kind of I would throw him like, well, try Come As You Are if you can't play Teen Spirit, and he'd be like, hey, that I could do. So he was ready. And that's how I think MMR began the transition.
Yeah.
From the old into this new era, and then continuing to evolve as it always does throughout its entire history, and adding new music and adding new trends and still incorporating.
I don't know how you do it. It is really pretty fascinating because you still manage to play, like, you got the Stones, and then you have like what was that band? I forget, the record company, and you know what I mean. It's like.
It's all mixed together.
It's mixed together, but it works. It works.
Speaking of the Stones,
and when it doesn't feel right, you change it. So I mean, that's kind of the thing too, especially on the overnights.
Yeah,
it's really more interactive because it's tougher for, say, Pierre or Jackson doing their shows,
right?
But once you get to the vampire, Jackie, he starts to let loose, and all kinds of weird stuff can and will happen on his show, and that kind of leads right into what the the overnight is with Brent usually.
Right.
And me this week.
Speaking of the Stones, Dave just brought up the Stones, and of course, Ray, you did Jonesing with the Stones for years on MGK. So, Ray, we got you on the air. I know you worked all last night. Can we got Sympathy for the Devil queued up? Can we give you can you give us a little Ray Koob introduction during Jonesing with the Stones, just so we get just a little taste? Can we get a little Ray Koob radio voice?
I'm going to try to create it without the actual song underneath.
No. We got the song ready to go. So we got it queued up. So
a little taste of the Stones. Serpent from the Beggar's Banquet menu. Sympathy for the Devil. MMR rocks.
Bravo.
There we go.
I'll allow you to do whatever.
Come on, who could do that?
Beating
like
them
that?
Was pretty crazy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And Dave, you guys played. You guys were in the same bill.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Staring Mick.
Phone.
Well, when Mick shows up, and you're not even supposed to see Mick, like we were opening for the Who in '82. It's like yesterday. Mick Jagger shows up, like you're like, what are you doing here? But it's like, you feel like you know him, and I mentioned that it was like I'm looking at a cartoon character. It's like I'm meeting Popeye. You know what I'm saying? He just, it's Mick, and he couldn't have been nicer and sweeter, and like all the Stones. Like I never met Charlie, and I would love to meet Charlie, and of course Keith. But man,
that Steel Wheels tour. They used to start a lot of tours in Philly.
Yeah.
The Steel Wheels at the Vet.
Yeah.
I was there the night the power went off, and before the show, Ted Utz, our program director, and we just kind of like worked our way to the right place, got on the right elevator. There you are. You're in the press room waiting for them.
Right.
And when they came in, it was like a madhouse. One after the other we're strolling in.
Yeah.
I'm just watching the whole thing going on while they're working the room. I end up in the corner, kind of like up against the wall. I bet, and I bump shoulders, and I look to my right, and it's Jerry Hall.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah.
She's tall enough in the heels to look me straight in the eye.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I'm like, oh, so very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
We're talking. I say, is it like this every night? And she says in her big, thick Texas drawl, she says, "Oh yeah, he just loves himself."
Oh,
and
man.
it wasn't said in a way that was like mean. Or
No.
anything. It was really funny,
Yeah.
And it's like for you though, as an artist, you've played on stages with and been on tour with all kinds of people. That's got to be a different kind of vibe. We didn't talk about that, I don't think, so much when you were on the podcast. We were just
you just mentioned Jerry Hall, and I got a great photo of me and Jerry together Jerry Hall back in when we played the Wall with Roger Waters, which was totally like phenomenal. Do 2 days, he did a rehearsal and then do the show, which is the biggest stage I ever played on. Then backstage hanging around with Albert Finney and Jerry Hall and Bryan Adams and Van Morrison and of course Roger and his band Jerry Hall she was funny. I remember how funny she was in that voice. You nailed it, man. She was very sweet.
Well, this has been fun.
Oh my God! Are you kidding me?
Listen,
Ray, we got to
talk
bring
about
you
a
back.
guy. Talk about a guy.
Really been talking that.
We have been talking an hour
on my Skype thing.
Hey, listen, man, we
Yeah.
got to bring it back because it was good. There's just so much that I'm.
Talk about somebody that
fascinated.
you could just listen to talk.
Yeah.
Ray, man, you got a gift, my friend. You have a gift. I mean, you really do. And as I said, I mean, you worked at it. It takes natural talent, but it also takes hard work. And obviously, you've put in so many hours of hard work to become as great as you are. But there's just certain voices you hear on the radio that just bring joy to you.
Yeah.
And Ray, not to kiss your ass too much,
no.
but you have that voice.
Yeah.
I mean, you have it's just
Yeah.
like I mean, it's.
Yeah, and keep at it, keep doing it, and because it's so real and authentic, and that's what has always been, that's what I love about you, Ray. It's the
when I
real
was a
deal.
kid-
You're a fan, and that it shows.
Well, when I was a kid, I learned a lot from Pierre and from Earl Bailey
Love
and
Earl.
Mark the Shark, all of them.
Love Earl.
Another great voice.
Remember Mark?
And one of the things I took away from it was always remember to thank him for listening. Remember to thank the audience because, as I say on the air, without you, I'm like a guy playing records in a closet. And it's true. And so an appreciation for this audience in Philadelphia, whether it's the classic rock audience or the MMR audience, which by the way, there's a lot of crossover there that I didn't realize until the last many years. My second round. Honestly, guys, I thought I was done with radio when I went to work for the record business.
Yeah.
And that was 97. To get a chance to come back just 5 years later, come back and be on the air every night and be part of the fabric of a great radio station like MGK, playing classic rock and being out broadcasting at all the concerts, that kind of fun stuff. There's things that you enjoy them when they're happening, and that way you don't feel funny when they're gone. Don't be sad that it's over. Just be glad it happened.
Yeah. Indeed.
And that's how I feel about a lot of this stuff, even the stuff that ended sooner than I would have liked to over the last 35 years, It's just a lot of fun.
They're great words, man.
I got to thank you for having me on.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
And I'm sorry you came on so early in our podcast almost 2 years ago, and it's taken me this long to get around to doing it, but I'm glad that we did it. And thanks to everybody who's been so kind. As soon as you guys put out the word that I was going to be on, so many people reacted on Facebook and Twitter and stuff. So it's very nice to be. It's nice to be loved.
Well, we love you.
We love you. Yeah, the pleasure.
Philly loves you. We love you.
The pleasure was ours.
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
Ray. So for the people that are listening, as we on the same day.
Overnight.
When are you on MMR this week? Are you overnights all week?
And tonight
Overnights all week. Usually you can find me on Saturdays in the middle of the day, standard PR time, and then whenever they need me to jump in here and there, I'm always there. And don't forget the Imbalanced History of Rock and Roll. No matter where you get your podcast, I found it on some fucking crazy apps, guys. There's an old Android app in India, which is the #1 source for our podcast in that amazing country where they're listening to us more and more. But you can find us anywhere. We've got our website, imbalancedhistory.com, where we put up blogs and stuff like that in addition to the episodes, but all links to all the episodes are there. We're on Spotify. That's big. A lot of people finding us on Pandora. And it's a fun podcast about rock and roll history. And we call it Imbalanced for a reason. I just want to warn people, you're going to say, what the fuck is wrong with these clowns? And then you realize, oh, yeah, they're stoned and they're fucked up. They're a little off kilter.
That's why I love you.
Well, that's why you picked 4 choices for #2 on your list of your top 5 blues guitarists. So there you go.
Only on the Imbalanced History. That's right.
And I saw you're doing a whole month of punk rock in April, right? You got a whole month of punk rock theme shows for April?
We remixed some of our original episodes, and we're doing our first full episode on the Stooges as the hammer. It's the hammer to the month. It's kind of fun to look at our old episodes, and some of them we realized could use a new coat of paint. So we've done that. We don't have a problem with doing that. And we're also going to do something in July that we thought of, and it was kind of happened a little here. Every now and then you'd get an episode suggestion from somebody who listens, but we got a lot of them. So we decided we're going to do listener episode month. And that's going to be in July, where basically it's going to be episodes suggested by the audience, and in some cases with them on it. So it should be fun.
That'll be cool.
That's what it's all about. It's all about the F word, guys.
Fucking right. Hey, so let us know how if we'll get the word out.
Yeah,
and
sure.
We appreciate it.
Balanced History of Rock and
Roll
with,
we love
with
it.
Ray Koob and Marcus in the Darkness.
It's
Good stuff. Ray, thank you again for being here. This was great.
Thank you, guys. Thanks
Outstanding.
for having me on. Love you.
Give our best to Marcus. All right. That's
Absolutely.
awesome. All right, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Ray.
Fantastic. It was great.
As I said, he's got the voice.
As
someone who always has kind of wanted to be behind a microphone in some kind of broadcasting, I'm very envious of voices like
listen,
that.
let me tell you what. We're not done yet. We're living in an age where you don't know what's going to come up these days. So.
Well, thank you so much to Ray Koob for joining us for the last hour. On short notice, too, because we had there was a scheduling mess up with someone
he
we were
was
trying
so
to get
great.
on. And especially after working the overnight last night. Yeah. That was great. Hey, thanks to Taylor, doing a great job as always. Thanks to Wildfire Radio. Thanks to Croker Percussion and School of Rock Main Line. For Dave, I'm Andy, and we'll see you next time on In the Pocket.